This time we're going to talk about marketing, and I think by the time we're done today, you're actually going to love it. Do you guys believe that when I say like you're going to love marketing? Because I used to hate it. You know, I'm a chiropractor. I'm a practitioner. I help people. I don't market. It's not who I didn't go to get my master's degree in marketing, and I know nothing about marketing. Well, guess what? I'm going to change all that today because we're going to take marketing tactics and we're going to make them stupid simple, like stupid simple. Okay. And once you understand these concepts, this concept really is just one, sky's the limit. And you guys know how much I love the virtual space. You can literally create anything at any time as long as you understand how to create something. 3 things, right? Promise, a timeline, hit the easy button. Help them get that promise as easy as possible. Today, we're going to teach you how to market it successfully, okay? And things that we do that we shouldn't be doing because it doesn't really create clients. Here are the 2 things. Okay, let's say 3 here. Let's go. 3 things I would never do again. Okay. Now this comes from, if I could go back and erase a whole bunch of content, I would. Because one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was I've shared way too much about blood work. Okay, blood work is my jam. Why are my labs normal? There's a reason why I wrote the book. In fact, if I were to go back and rewrite this book, which maybe I should before launching it again, I'm going to take a little bit of that golden stuff out of there because there's way too much gold in here for $27. It needs to be like $997. Okay, the next thing is be careful with what you're doing as far as content on social media. Like I said, I've shared way too much of blood work. That said, if you go to my TikTok account, which I haven't used in probably over a year now, I had a lot of videos go viral fast. I went from 0 to 80,000 followers in less than 3 months on TikTok. It's because I would say like, hey, do you think your fibromyalgia is because you're lacking Lyrica or whatever the heck the medication's called? I think it's because you have a bacterial infection. Go grab your labs and look at this marker. If it's above this, you'll see. I mean, those kind of videos went viral, and they went viral very fast. Remember, I'd wake up the next day, and I would only post, guys, on TikTok. I would post 4 or 5 times a week, and I'd always do it at prime time. So I was always do it between 7 and 8 p.m., which is really big if you're trying to grow on that platform. So just be careful about sharing too much informational content, okay? If you're going to share content, I would steer it more towards stories, which I do now. Like I said, if I could go back and erase 2 years worth of content, I would erase a lot of this stuff. The second biggest mistake I've ever made, when I write this down, how many others would say the same thing? Okay, so there's a difference between automated webinars and live workshops, live events, live intensives, whatever you want to call it. There's a big difference between something that you record and push play on, and then something that you host live like this. Okay. I did 6 of them. I'm just going to tell you from my experience. This is purely my experience. I did 6 webinars. This is in 2019, before Zoom was like accepted as everything. I rented out a studio. I hired a professional photographer. I did all the things. I hired someone to write the copy for the sales pages. I did all the things right that I was told I needed to do. Okay, so I ran 6 of them. And this gets back to what we're going to talk about today with the one thing. Because I ran 6 of them, which made it so my audience was confused. I had a I had a webinar on hormones, which led to an automated course on hormones. I had a problem with, I think I did hormones, I did chronic fatigue, I did thyroid, I did, all of the autoimmune, all the big top 6 ones, which meant if someone had a problem with chronic fatigue and then their hormones were imbalanced, they were confused about which one to take because they needed both. So that's what we're going to get into today is your niche and the one thing. And then I'm going to teach you the one trick that I learned, and it will change the game in the way you create your copy. I don't care if you use AI or you don't use AI. It will change the way you talk on a live video, because heaven forbid you can't use AI. Well, I wouldn't recommend using AI to be you on video. People can see through that crap. Okay, so automated webinars. I did 6 of them, did everything right, was told I did everything right. Okay, the final one. I wrote this down. Oh, I paid $1,800 for a TV appearance back in, I think was it 2018, Kelly, or 2019? Local TV network. I thought TV has all this credibility, this authority with it. I'm going to go live. Give me 3 minutes, and then the phone's going to be ringing off the hook.
I think it was 2018.
Like January of 2024, we got a big fat 0. 0 leads, no emails, nothing, not a zilch, zippo, nothing for $1,800. Now, did I learn that I'm really good on TV? I did. I rocked that live TV 3-minute thing. But 3 minutes is not enough to get someone to make a phone call. And so it was like my whole entire plan after the TV appearance was a complete disaster. I've learned a lot since then. Will I be back on TV? Yes. I've done national TV appearances since then. So be very careful. Learn from my mistakes. If you have to completely pivot. It's okay. That's one of the things I want to make sure you guys are very clear with when it comes to the virtual space. You have to be okay building something and then blowing it up. I cannot tell you how many times I've built a website that no longer exists. How many times I've built copy pages that didn't work, that I just blew up. Those 6 webinar pages, I probably spent at least $100,000 on that entire process. I blew it all up. I had 2 people join one of the automated courses over the duration. Spent ads on it, hired the team. I mean, I did everything right that I was told to do. Didn't work. What does work? Let's get into that. Okay. What does work? I want you to think about marketing in 2 aspects. So we have long-term marketing and we have short-term marketing. That's what I call it anyways. Long-term marketing are things like social media, because you're going to post on social media, spend hours and hours doing it over the course of years. And you'll get clients from there, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's a long-term game. Another long-term game is podcasts. Let me tell you the very best thing I've ever done for my business. Podcasts. I host 2, like I said. So the first one I started in 2020, Beyond the Diagnosis, still exists. We're going on 300 episodes, I think, around at this point. That podcast has built my business. I would tell people from TikTok to go listen to the podcast because, it's like a 7-second TikTok. I can't tell you much in 7 seconds, but I can lead you to somewhere else. And that was the podcast. So I started that podcast in 2020, having never, ever, ever listen to a podcast episode in my life. I take action, I take it fast, and I take it with fear in the passenger seat. Okay. I host monthly live webinars, been seriously thinking about it. If you're hosting monthly, see, there's a difference. Live is very different than automated. So I would call them, I hate the word webinar. I have a very bad negative connotation with the word webinar. I would call it a live workshop and see if you get better attendance, or live masterclass, or live intensive, or live event. I promise you'll get better attendance by removing that word webinar. Yes, fear in the passenger seat. I'm glad you caught that, Dr. Delgado. Said it for a reason. Would you be sharing too much information on podcasts, though? If you go back to my early days of podcasting, I did a lot of patient consultations. And let's have a little detour and talk about podcasting for a second. Okay, so I have the Beyond the Diagnosis. Then I also have the 10,000 patients, which is one for you guys. Okay, so this one goes to practitioners. But this one started everything for me. This was directed to patients so I could build my practice. This one was, I should write this down. This one is directed to practitioners. And you can find these on any platform. You can go subscribe to them now. It'd be sweet if you did. Beyond the Diagnosis, I started off doing one episode per week. And it was basically, I'd get examples of blood work of patients. And sometimes I would say, hey, if you're curious to see what your blood work says, I actually have like 4 or 5 spots open on my podcast. I'd love to sit down and have a conversation with you, knowing that our conversation is going to be portrayed on the podcast. We'll remove anything out. We'll edit anything out of it that you need to keep things private, right? But I just gave them a heads up, like, hey, we're gonna have a conversation about your blood work and your health history. And that's going to be on our podcast. You guys, those episodes blew up. I spent no marketing money on my podcast. The only thing I did to market it was other social medias, direct traffic towards my podcast. And then I would go and be a guest on as many podcasts as possible. So number one to growing podcasts is content. Now you want to make money from podcasting as a host, let's say this as a host. There's multiple ways to do it. Sponsorships being the one that people think about the most. I have sponsorships. I've had them for many years. Well, I've only been podcasting for 4 years. So 2 years of sponsorships, but those are all about relationships. Like you have to build relationships with people and their companies in order to go ask for a sponsorship. Okay. The number one way is to interview clients or potential clients. So if you were to throw out onto your email list or have a sign in your office or onto your social media and say, hey, I'm starting a podcast and I want to invite the first 10 people to have this conversation with me about their blood work. Now you can phrase it however you want, but blood work works very well because everybody has it, right? And then once you get their blood work, you get to be off air. So you hit ending to the recording. Then off air, you would say, you know what? After this conversation, I think we should have another conversation about joining my 90-day program. Okay. Now I will tell you a few things of what not to do when it comes to this, like interviewing clients. I get really irritated when I'm invited onto a podcast, and that's happened a couple of times because I know you can just tell. Okay, you can tell that they're that kind of podcast that just wants to invite potential clients on and then have a sales conversation afterwards. So mix up your podcast episodes when it comes to like having client conversations and bringing on guests. I will tell you the number one mistake I've made with podcasting is I've brought on too many guests. Okay. I'm the expert. I'm paying for this podcast. People need to come to me, not to all the guests that I have on. And trust me, it's really easy to get guests. So just be careful about that conversation afterwards when it comes to that sell. Now, for a patient, I've never had a problem with it. But for me as a client for someone else, I'm like, don't invite me onto your 7-figure business podcast and want to sell me into your program next time. Like, that is the most sleazy, in my opinion, the way that this one company approached it. It was very sleazy. The reason why I say I share too much information is because people literally can grab this book and know how to read all their labs. Okay. Now, knowing how to read their labs versus knowing what to do about them is a different story. So you can teach them the what. The how comes inside your programs, which is why if you were to go get this book and in the original version, the call to action was like, go grab the 5-step guide to the 5 steps to healing, something like that. I can't remember. I blew it up. Okay, so the point of this first hour today is for you guys to know, like, if you're doing something that's not working, blow it up. It's fine. It's part of the process. Sucks. Trust me, it sucks. But you move on, because if not this, something better. So I blew up this guide, and I still had people asking for, like, hey, I'm going to this page and it's not there. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. Because I was giving too much of the how. Give the what. And those patient examples are fantastic. People love them. Okay, so that's how I started making money with podcasts, is I would just grow my podcast and it would filter in clients. Okay. Now, that program we created yesterday for Lynette, I think it was $297 blood work consultation on my podcast. That's what I would invite them to do. If you're ready to get your blood work examined and have a real plan, go book a consult with me. And it was $497 for me. And I would just have people booking it from the podcast. And that's how I would get patients in the door, in addition to live workshops. So there's my little 2 cents about podcasting. Been the best thing I've ever done. And I've pretty much stayed consistent with it. I took a break last year leading up to Chloe's birth. I think I took like a 6-month break, but it's awesome. Okay, so long term, we have social media, we have podcasts. Short term would be things like hosting events. I want to say live. I have not had much luck with webinars, as you all know now. And many of you haven't either. So I don't know why it's still taught. Like, Casey, I'm so sorry right now. I don't know why people still think that webinars are so great, because they only work for the 1% of them, when the 1% of people. And then you have to have a crap ton of money ads to spend on it. Okay, so short term are things like events. I love hosting the live workshops. The difference is you're going to pull clients into this quickly. This one takes a while to pull clients. But you need both, right? Like, I'm hosting a podcast. I'm hosting 2 of them. We've tossed around the idea of starting hosting a third one, because they work so well. Short term, I do live events a lot. Do the workshops work well? Oh, yes. It's how I built my business. It's how I built all my patient practice in 21, 22, and then I took a break in 23. Email series. Oh, always. I can't stress this enough. Build your email. Okay. So then here's the next step. If they don't want to do the $495 from the podcast, go grab this, and they're going to join the email list. On podcasts, it's a great way to get people into your world from social media. Other people's podcasts. So you can use what they call leverage other people's audiences, OPA. When you join other people's podcasts and they say, oh, how can I learn more about you? You know what? Go grab this ebook that we created yesterday. Now they've joined your email. Okay. My 2 priorities right now are email and podcast. we are actually going to be adding YouTube to the mix. Those are my 3 priorities when it comes to marketing and where to be. Now, these are typically long-term. That can be short-term. These 2 are like evergreen. People funnel into your world at all times. Text messages, yes, I would use text messages as well, but I would make sure you've got the right systems in place to do that. Censorship, no. The reason why is because my podcast episodes are the same as my YouTube videos. So if they don't get liked on YouTube, then they're going to get safe. They're going to be safe on podcasts. If Joe Rogan can say what he says on podcasts, it's safe on podcasts. So that's another reason why I love podcasting so much, is because it's not controlled. Nobody can just take your podcast from you. Nobody can steal it. Can't get hacked. Those kind of things.